aye. Opposed, motion carries 4-0. Great, thanks again, Jeanette, and thanks for coming in on when not feeling well. Take it from here, so thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no objection, I'll adjourn the canvassing board meeting. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at 6:28. Take a quick 2-minute break before our council meeting starts.
We'll get some rest. Feel better.
Yeah, I'm leaving. I'm heading out at noon. Right.
Feel better.
The cannabis thing? Just modify, change whatever you need to change, and then I'll work on making it pretty after it.
Sounds
We
good.
could talk about it if that's okay.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
All right,
sounds
you
good.
feel better.
Thank you. All good to go? I'm gonna change this one.
Hey Cody, you got to vote for mayor.
Yeah, I saw that.
I just have.
One. Yeah. I think. Oh really? You've had more?
I think you did too.
Yeah, it was one this time. You tied Denny.
It's
You tied Denny Walsh though, so that's good.
it's that reduction in campaigning.
Oh, and you tied Santa too.
Were you going to want to read the report, or you were just going to want me to do it?
Read it word for word.
No, I'm just saying, do you want to present you present it, or do you want me to present it? Okay. Yeah, because I didn't know for sure. He said that he may or may not be here. You may or may not be here. I'm like, well, if someone's here, great. If not, I can do it. So that'd be good. You can talk about it way more than I can.
Kind of a sound.
Bill there.
Right.
They almost seem like a weight has been lifted off.
Oh really? I thought you were going to say it almost seems like a wake.
All right, so next. The red light is on. All right, we'll call to order the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the Long Lake City Council. It is now 6:31 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and all council members are present this evening with the exception of Councilmember Joyce. And we will roll into item number 3, which is mayor comments, Long Lake news, meeting review, and updates. So for starters, already this evening we had an Economic Development Authority meeting where we discussed proposal for the purchase of city-owned land at the former BP gas station site at I don't have the address in front of me, but it's our corner lot that many are familiar with. Essentially, in the end, we gave direction to staff to some further direction to staff in that matter, so more to come on that. And we also just finished a canvassing board meeting. So that is where we certified the results, our local election results for the election that occurred last Tuesday. And I'll just roll right into that and just give a couple of shout outs there and updates there. First of all, thank you to City Clerk Jeanette Muller and all of her election judges for the great work that they did last Tuesday. She reported just a few minutes ago that we had 1,214 voters in Long Lake on election, or between Election Day and the preceding weeks leading up to it. So 743 voters on Election Day and 471 that voted beforehand in varying ways. And that resulted in a 94% voter turnout. So that is very high, a little bit above the averages that we see in our area. Fabulous to see. It's a little bit, as Jeanette reported, a little more work to have folks that are coming in on a gradual basis each day to vote ahead of time in person. So we appreciate their work on that. We want to make sure that as many people as possible can vote, but there are some sort of extra work for staff when it comes to that. So great work by our staff, election judges. Congratulations to Councilmember Mike Feldman for being elected for another 4 years. And then congratulations to Todd Newcomer for being a newly elected council member with a 4-year term as well. And Todd is essentially replacing Gina Joyce, who is finishing up her 4-year term here and decided not to run again. So we'll see Gina here hopefully 2 weeks from today, and as well as in December for a few more meetings here. And we'll celebrate Gina's time with us at that time. And then I appreciate Long Lake voters for voting me in for another 2-year term as well. Thank you for that. Looking forward to another 2 years on the council. So that was a big day, Election Day. And then besides that, otherwise just Halloween occurred, I think, since we met last. And I don't know about others' houses. I think I had the most trick-or-treaters we've ever had at my house on Halloween after 30-some years. So I don't know what that was all about. That's great. You had a lot over on Creekside, too?
We did,
Nice, okay.
more than past years.
Yeah, a lot of excitement in the air, and despite the fact there was cold and a little bit of snow that day, so fun to see that. So those are some city updates from what has occurred over the last 2 weeks to recap things, with Election Day being the big one. All right, so with that, we will move on to item 4, which is to approve this evening's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. I'll second.
All right, thank you. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 5 is a consent agenda. We have items A through F on the consent agenda this evening. A few things I'll point out is item 5D as in David, which is to accept the resignation of firefighter Kennedy Wright from the Long Lake Fire Department. So Kennedy served the LFD and the communities it serves for the last 5 years. We very much appreciate firefighter Wright's service to our community. He is leaving to join the Mound Fire Department, and this is another sort of side effect from the legal situation that we've been in with City of Orono and the impact that's had on our Station 2. So he decided rather than join the Orono Fire Department, he would join the Mound Fire Department, and it was sad to see him leave, and wish him well in his new service to the Mound community. And also, item 5E is a permit for our holiday tree lighting ceremony. It's amazing that's going to be here before we know it already, in another 3-4 weeks. So Friday, December 6th is when that will occur, and we'll be approving a permit for that. If you haven't been through Holbrook Park lately, there's I think I mentioned before, a great new evergreen tree there that replaced the previous Charlie Brown Christmas tree that didn't make it too many years. That's there, as well as staff has had some electrical work done. So we have some new outlets there we'll plug the tree into, and won't have folks stepping over extension cords anymore, things like that. So we'll put out more information on that as it draws near, try to get as many community members as possible to participate in that event. And then finally, item F is appointing resident Leslie Bueller to a position of park board members for a term that would be effective through the end of 2025. So Leslie is a 20-year resident of Long Lake, and we sometimes have challenges getting folks to step up to serve on our boards and commissions. So we very much appreciate Leslie stepping forward to be a member of our park board. And that is the final item on the consent agenda. So besides those kind of highlights, any questions for staff regarding items on our consent agenda this evening? If not, I entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 6, open correspondence. Open correspondence is an item on the agenda during which the public may address the city council. No formal action is taken by the city council, and comments shall be limited to 5 minutes or less. And community members may also submit open correspondence to city staff by emailing those comments by noon on the day of the meeting. Anybody wish to approach tonight? I don't think so. Any submitted comments?
None. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, then we'll move on to item 7, regular business, starting with 7A. Discuss final invoice from Hennepin County for CASA 112 or Wayzata Boulevard West Phase 1 project. So we'll start with City Administrator Westgate.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. So the item in front of you is discussion and approval of the final invoice from Hennepin County. As you may remember, 2016, the City of Long Lake entered into a construction agreement with Hennepin County for CASA 112 reconstruction. That is going to include utilities, street lighting, pedestrian improvements in downtown. It was the distance from Willow Drive to Wolf Point Trail that was considered phase 1. And so that project was actually closed out in 2020, but now it is time to pay Hennepin County the final payment, and they're requesting that. I know it is 4 years after the closing of the project, but per the contract, they had some other situational things to where they couldn't do the final invoicing until now. The project breakdown and quantities have been reviewed by WSB, and everything has been accounted for. And they didn't understand if there was anything related to the legal process, if there was any outstanding fees related to that. But we've had some discussions, and it doesn't sound like Long Lake got charged for any of the Hennepin County right-of-way legal discussions. So in your packet is,
Legal discussions, was that?
that's going to be, I think, negotiating value of the right-of-way. Hennepin County does have representatives here for you to ask them questions a little bit more in detail.
For land that was acquired or
Yeah,
something?
for I think the trail, I believe, and right away on the side of there. So then your report is the Hennepin County letter, the invoice, the project breakdown, along with the agreement that was assigned in 2016. So I guess with that, there is representation from Hennepin County if you would like to ask them some more questions that they'll have way more expertise on.
Can I ask you a question? You're talking about the right-of-way, and they had anticipated costs. It's the first thing listed from this August 5th letter, for almost 15,000. Final participation cost, 20,000. And so that's part of that we have to pay. Was that the right-of-way?
I believe that also had to do with some, yes, had to do with the trail being removed from the south side to the north side.
Wasn't that the
That was-
consulting service we paid 133 for that?
133 was the design,
Okay. And so this was moving the trail and getting the right-of-ways?
correct.
Oh, okay. And then there was some litigation involving that?
Well, and that's what I don't have knowledge of. I just know that it was that's why there was the hang up on the final invoicing was some litigation that Hennepin County and homeowners were negotiating,
Couldn't they have had an interim invoice?
not per the contract.
Oh, okay. Because there was a down payment that we had to put on it.
Yeah, we did 50% up front, then 45% towards the end of completion. They have their 5% retainer, then final cost after they go through all the invoicing.
So what's the construction line, the big one, the 118,000? What is that for? I mean, is it just what the overage was?
Correct. That's going to be your 5% retainer plus any overages.
The estimate was 920.
So were we supposed to put down 50%?
We did 50%, I think, at the beginning of the project. Then through process, it was 45% for a second payment, which brought you to 95% of estimate. And then they take the estimate, 5% of that is the retention that holds until the project is closed out. And then they either refund you or charge accordingly based on final quantities.
Yeah, and Carl and team, if you tell us what the right time is to come up, if there's questions you want to shed light on, or otherwise we'll.
I'm open if there's questions.
Okay.
You know, okay, just I read the contract, and it gets confusing in the contract. They use the same term for different things, or different terms for the same thing, like construction engineering versus construction administration. So is this what is construction engineering? Because it's not design engineering. What, is that construction administration?
I think these would be better directed.
Because, I mean, it's in the contract, it's
As far as-
multiple things.
Yeah,
Usually let him carve
yeah,
them up.
you're right, it could mean a couple of different things, but I think they can offer clarity as far as what the buildings are actually for,
Okay.
for that largest payment.
Any volunteers? Yeah, if you'd step up to the mic, please, thank you.
Typically, the layman terms that we,
And if you could just identify yourself, please, sir.
yeah. Hi, I'm Nariman Benaki. I'm our deputy county engineer with Hennepin County. So construction administration is generally an engineering services to build the project. So it's the engineering staff that's out in the field doing measurements, quality testing. That's the term we use for construction administration. The engineering services would be the design engineering, as mentioned, and then the construction line item is for the actual construction, payment of quantities, and the various items that were built with the project. So those are kind of the general terms that we use. That's the design engineering, the construction, and then construction administration. But happy to clarify if there was any.
No, I think, so the construction engineering is the same as the construction administration in the contract, because the numbers are the same, but they just use the different terms
Oh,
for the
gotcha.
same thing, but I assume
Yeah,
that that's,
yeah.
it got confusing.
Yeah, yep. Sorry about that. Yeah, we use that term kind of interchangeably.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
It's the engineering for construction or administering the construction contract. So
Okay.
that's why we use those terms.
So it's pretty much the same bucket that you put this cost
Yes, I
into?
believe so.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for county staff?
So I heard it was closed out in 2020, but then this bill's coming in late. So is it closed out and all the inspections and everything completed at
Yes.
some point?
Yeah. Nariman Benaki again, Hennepin County.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, at this point, yep, everything is closed out. Those pending legal matters that did not, to clarify one question I heard earlier, did not apply to Long Lake specifically, but were part of the overall contract. And so those are things that we need to consider when doing our final project reconciliation or closeout process. And those have all been closed out now. So this is the final invoice.
This is the final invoice, but the final inspections and any warranties and stuff triggered some prior date.
Yes, yep, they had other contractual dates to them.
Okay.
That's correct. This one's specific to the invoicing with the city.
Okay.
So what were those litigation things? I'm just curious.
Probably should have asked our attorneys before coming, what we can't say. But just at very high level, we acquire not full properties on projects like this, but, easements, temporary permanent easements along the corridor as needed. And majority of the time, those negotiations go very well, things work out well, and we go through our right-of-way acquisition process on the front end of projects. When they don't go well, they can linger on for a long time in the courts, and get appealed, and the process can be very
Okay.
long. And so that process on a few parcels did take very long in this instance, and are now resolved. And so we're able to close out the project.
okay. Thank you.
And to clarify that, the right-of-way amount that you're seeing now is not related to that, just to be clear, the additional right-of-way amount.
Okay. And then this is phase one, obviously, so I forget what the 3 phases or 2 phases for this CASAT 112 project?
Three.
3?
There's 3 phases, yep, there was phase 1, as mentioned, and then phase 2 is east of that. They are both completed, and dates
Okay,
were,
that's right.
a few years ago, as mentioned in the introduction.
Are we gonna get a bill for phase 2?
That's, I think,
There is one, but it's not included in here, so that one's only like 15,000 for final.
That's west of Willow?
No.
That one's gonna be east. That one's all the way to
East
the
of,
bridge.
Loose Line Bridge? yeah?
Yeah,
east of
Wolf
Birches.
Point all the way back to
Okay.
the
So
Wayzata boundary,
Which one was that?
phase 2.
That's phase
called that
2.
phase 2. It was a little confusing. We started in the middle, it's phase 1. We went to the east, that was phase 2.
And then
We're now
phase-
doing
phase
phase
three.
3, which is, from a construction standpoint, substantially complete or nearing completion, end of this month, as you all probably noticed driving through there. That project will be done this year, and that will be complete after this year.
And we'll get a bill for that too.
That will
Or have we
complete all
paid?
three phases.
Yeah, but we don't have much in that.
Yeah,
We have some.
yeah.
Is,
Okay. So
yeah, it
there's-
won't be a large dollar amount.
But, yeah, and this one's a pretty significant dollar amount.
Yeah.
So is there, I mean, it's a
Right,
little bit of
so-
a surprise, given the percentage of our levy that this would be.
Well,
This would come out of the turnback fund, or what used to be.
and what I need to find is we did bond for this dollar amount, so it is accounted for in the audit as proceeds, I believe. I can't remember how they define it. So technically, this money should be sitting in an account that's earmarked only for this payment. So I'll have to find in the audit, or I will just have to talk to the auditor on which one account I pay it from. So make sure that I don't have to keep doing transaction or data entry for moving the
But this wouldn't
payment.
come out of our operation.
Yeah, okay, good.
correct.
Carla, did you want to say anything? You on standby?
Carla Seeley, Hennepin County, County Engineer. I just wanted to add, I understand it's a large dollar amount, so if the city wants to work through some payment plan options with us, that would be acceptable too, so we can work through that.
Yeah. Is that just something, Scott, you guys can take offline, or do we need anything from us?
Is that
on this?
I
necessary?
mean,
or-
it depends on what direction you guys want to go. I mean, I have it as just a motion to approve, but if you want to give me parameters or however you want to look at it.
Aren't there kind of things spelled out in this contract regarding payment and interest if it's not paid, and so they'd be willing to waive that based on the contract?
No, there isn't a specific provision in the contract related to the date of project. Now, the construction contract would have substantial and final completion dates, but there isn't a trigger in the contract that says a bill is due in this much time. Actually, the only billing date is the date that comes from the county to the city. Now, there's reasonableness that gets applied to that, of course, but I think the information you're getting tonight is the justification for why the billing was later than anticipated. Had a lot to do, it sounds like, to some condemnation
Yeah.
actions and resolution of those. So,
But
I
it does
believe-
talk about late penalties for payment, that it wasn't.
I don't believe Hennepin, I don't want to speak for him, I don't believe they're pursuing anything like that. It's simply they wanted to provide information about why they're asking for the payment they are. Am I fair? Okay.
If we have it allocated.
Well, and that's what
Yeah.
my only concern is I don't know how much with the overrun,
Well, could we see
like,
when you see what we have set aside and then
yeah,
talk to
I
them
will,
about
yeah, I can do that.
options?
Okay. I'll find the dollar amount that we have. But then we still can have a motion to approve, just,
Can we make a motion to approve, and then does that give you the green light to work with the county and,
let's do it that way.
okay, so how do you want the motion structured, or is what here gets that done?
Discuss final invoice from him. Authorize staff to approve final payment and contingent upon appropriate payment options or methods or schedule.
Maybe we can just say, approval of the final payment, and then allow staff to work with Hennepin County on the payment method or timing if the overages needs to be, if the money is there, great, we can pay it. Because I don't remember how much the bond was for, but if we have to go back into a different fund, maybe you want me to pay it 2 different times if there's not enough to cover the bond that we took out. So then everybody can approve that second part of that cash from whatever fund they choose. If that makes sense? I mean, it's totally up to you. And it doesn't, I don't know if it necessarily matters, but
Yeah.
So-
Well, whatever helps you guys facilitate getting it done, because it
Yeah.
feels like everybody's on the same page, it's just a matter of making sure we find the funds and
But if,
pay our bills.
yeah, if there's a partial payment and then there's a question of where the money should come from, maybe we could ask for, to pay later and just kind of have this discussion at the next council meeting, approve it, and just making sure that any sort of, if there is any, penalties due under the contract, that those are waived officially.
okay. So if you want to make that motion, that sounds great.
I make a motion to approve, is it in here? The final invoice and approve the final payment in the amount of $153,000, $153,677.06, and direct Scott to take the money out of any bonding account that we had specifically designated for payment of these costs. And if those, if the amount in those accounts is not sufficient, to bring it back to the council to make a determination of how what proceeds will be used to pay the obligation, and work with the county to get an extension for that decision, which county. I don't know if I.
That worked for me.
I like that, I'll second it.
Second?
All right, thank you. Hopefully Scott got all that down.
Yeah, no,
Speed
that's
ready?
great. Just understand, I got it.
All right,
Perfect.
thank you. All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to comment that I was reminded of that 133,000 to push the trail to the other side of the road. I was one of the big people that pushed for that, and I think that was worth the money, because having it along the lake, I think, has been a real benefit to our community.
I would agree.
Well, so at the time, they were going to have a crossing at Martha Lane, and then the trail was going to be on the south side over to Wurzer Trail, and which kind of made sense because it connected with the neighborhoods, beyond, farther east. And now we have to have that trail cross, the road crossing at Wurzer Trail, which is kind of inconvenient, I suppose. But I think having the trail right along the lake was the right move. So I don't regret that,
That was, I think it,
although that was a lot of money too.
Nice walk, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Great. Thank you, county staff,
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
attending this evening. Okay. Item number 7B is in boy, approved purchase of 2007 Toynia, I can't even pronounce that, fire truck for the Long Lake Fire Department. So Assistant Chief Farley, good evening.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, thanks for having me. Just about 3 weeks ago, we took in our new 2007, new to us, Toyne-built fire engine from Excelsior Fire District. And since then, we've already had it out to have the Excelsior graphics removed and Long Lake graphics put on, and it's back now, looking right at home amongst the rest of our trucks. Blends right in with the rest of the family.
did you bring a picture?
I have a picture. I could show you a picture. I'll pull that up for you in just a second. Since it's been back, we've already had firefighters out driving it. We'll have a requisite amount of drive time that our operators will need to put in before they're able to drive it on a scene or to a scene. That'll happen. Started about a week ago, and will continue for the next about 3 weeks. We'll get enough operators through that process to feel comfortable having it in service, and then we'll have a rush couple of days to take all the equipment off of existing Engine 11 and put it all on what it will be now new Engine 11, and we're looking about 3 weeks out to complete that process. So I'm here today just to request the final payment of $104,000 to the Excelsior Fire District for that engine. The apparatus itself was $100,000. And we negotiated some extra equipment that they did not need for their new engine that they were willing to sell us. So that $4,000 was for headsets for the cab members, folks in the cab, to be able to communicate while en route to a scene, 3 or 4 ladders that came with the truck, as well as some extrication equipment. So for the total of $104,000 that we'd be looking for the city to pay the Excelsior Fire District.
How are the tires on it?
Brand new.
Are they?
Yep.
No.
That's great. 'Cause those
Yep,
aren't-
and the pump was just gone through by Kervita. They service all of our apparatus, and everything checked out and is in great functioning order.
And is our plan to sell the old engine 11?
Yes.
And
Yep.
so we can, can we sort of put some of that money towards this?
No. Well, yes. You're going to use your 5%,
percentage,
your
yeah.
5% give or take of what it was of the sale price that you can, or you end up rolling it into something else depending on what future looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Have we sold that big,
Rescue.
big rescue? Weren't we gonna sell that?
Rescue 12, that is still being talked about, what, if it has any future value for us, or if it's, just assume have it be gone and do something else with that.
Because, you know, we're
those
getting
funds.
another, the utility truck soon, and, you
Yep.
know, who knows what else.
And that, the rescue pumper that we're receiving is a replacement for Utility 11.
Right.
Not necessarily a Rescue 12. So Rescue 12 has its purpose. It's fairly limited in its use, but it does serve a purpose. And we don't currently have a replacement plan for what we use it for, so it's still an active member of the fleet.
Any updates on the ETA of the arrival of the new utility vehicle or rescue?
It'll be early January.
Oh, okay, good.
Yep, and that was confirmed just a couple weeks ago.
Nice. All right.
You said that we got some Jaws of Life with this one too that we bought from you?
Yeah, they'll be essentially a backup pair. We have our battery-powered sets that we have on our first out engines, and those will move over to new engine 11. So this will just be, you know, in the event that there was a second vehicle that we needed to work on simultaneously, or if for whatever reason we just needed a backup pair.
These aren't battery, correct?
No,
These are
no,
old
they're
battery.
hard plumb to the truck.
Yeah, okay.
So engine 22 and engine 11 now are our newest or best engines.
Yep, so engine 22 will remain the first out engine for Station 2, and our new engine 11 will be our first out engine for Station 1.
Good, okay.
Both set up very similarly, both cab forward designs. The layout in terms of tool location will be very similar, more so than it is now, so that'll be a good benefit to the firefighters.
Ladders on top, right? So-
Ladders on top, yep, on an arm that brings them down to an accessible height.
Right.
That's great. I saw it the other day and looked good. Be a nice addition to the fleet.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of the 2007 Towing Fire Truck and accessories for $104,000 as agreed upon by the Excelsior Fire District and the City of Long Lake, and authorize the city administrator to pay any taxes or fees that may be associated with this purchase.
I'll second that. Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
One question, if we were to, because I know that going forward, we don't know how things are going to shape up, but this has a pretty good, as I understand, a pretty good resale too, if we decided to kind of coordinate a different way. We could, take a little bit of a hit for the purchase price, but the resale on,
Sure, certainly we would, yep, there would be other departments that would find value in it, just like
Okay.
we did, so, definitely.
okay, perfect. Are we at second?
Yeah, and Councilman Dybek?
Yeah, so is this coming out of our fire capital fund?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you,
Chief
Council.
Farley, appreciate
I
that.
do have a picture if you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it looks nice. That looks really nice. Yeah.
It's right in.
Yeah. See the picture, yeah, good graphics, classic LLFT.
Stop on by, we'll take you for a ride.
Yeah, I saw it this morning.
All right, thank you. With that, we move on to item 7C, review rough draft of cannabis and cannabis business regulations ordinance. City Attorney Thames?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In your packet, you have a rough draft of the proposed business regulations for cannabis. As you all know, Minnesota Statute 342 has been passed and will take effect in full at the turn of the calendar. We have a moratorium in place to basically control any business applications, particularly retail applications, while we consider these regulations and plan for the rollout. This is, what we're looking at is probably a dual rollout. You've got the business regs here. We will be concurrently presenting, and I believe you have in front of you from your planner, Hannah Ryback, the zoning restrictions that will contain some performance standards that referenced in the draft here. The bottom line is So I took the Office of Cannabis Management, or OCM, offered this summer a kind of model ordinance. It had a few issues with it, but I sort of took that framework and worked through it to adapt it to what I'd heard in the past from the council. The presumption I used was that it was the council's desire to limit this, the amount of cannabis businesses locally as much as possible. So I have done that, which is to limit it as much as you have the authority to do.
To one?
One or less than one, depending on the situation. But we'll get into that. Remember from 2023, we dealt with low potency hemp edibles. That ordinance, basically what we propose to do is repeal and replace with this. This new ordinance will roll those considerations into this regulation. And the zoning ordinance will have to go through planning commission, which we would do at their next meeting, and then both would be brought back to the council at your meeting in December for review and approval. And the idea would be to have this in place before the calendar turns over and the moratorium expires. So Hannah has offered a memo. She had a conflict for this evening that has some of the considerations she kind of wanted the council to think about. I believe you have that, but if you don't, I can go over that individually. Also, I'll have a few kind of general questions, and I can kind of get the highlights if that's the easiest thing to start. So I mentioned that this follows the OCM draft and then adapts it from there. And I mentioned my intent was sort of to restrict it up to our authority under the law. The 342 cities primarily authority related to local zoning, but your authority is primarily related to the retail operation of businesses locally. You don't have a lot to say about other operations. And the way to think about it is if you treat cannabis as basically any other legal product, if you can manufacture widgets, you can manufacture cannabis, right? If you can ship widgets, you can ship cannabis, right? Legal product, that's how you have to consider that. Now, generally speaking, with whatever it is, 12 or 15 different licenses that they have at the state level, there has to be a place for all of them. You have to allow the form. As far as the retail goes, your authority is to limit that down to 1 per 12,500 residents, right? 12,500. So in theory, that would be 1 for us. However, if Hennepin County were to reach a threshold of 1 per 12,500 prior to you getting an application, you don't have to allow 1 locally. So I've just basically taken the liberty of applying that standard, which is to say we would allow 1 if we have to allow 1. We will choose to allow 0 if we can allow 0. Okay. Those restrictions are found in the business regs. And so the zoning ordinance will call back to those provisions to say that it's allowed, for example, in the B2 district, subject to those restrictions and limitations. So if an applicant were to come in, again, remember, our authority on this is very limited. The state does all the licensing. We're simply registering businesses. And you're limited to just a limited list of questions that you can really ask. And one of the questions you're going to get asked for a retail business is, does it conflict with local zoning, or does it comply with local zoning? And if you have these restrictions in and you limit it concurrently down to 1 and a second applicant were to come in, you can say, no, it does not comply with zoning. That's why it's important to have the references to the business ordinance be in the zoning ordinance as well as the performance standards, which Hannah and I have worked together on, and we're going to be doing that. So one high-level question for the council to start would be whether there's any desire to have a second public hearing. Time is tight, of course, and you can decide if you think it's necessary, but generally speaking, what most cities I'm seeing do is when they run through their planning commission review, I will make the business regs available for that public hearing as well, so that there can be public input taken on that evening. Planning commissions, the lens through which planning commission will do this is primarily to give you guidance on the zoning restrictions. I realize that, but the public can comment on any and all of it. You can take that input and then make your own approval, amendment, or denial of that at the council meeting to follow. You can also notice and hold a second public hearing if you so choose although I haven't seen a lot of cities do that just because of the timing. But just want to make you aware of the options. Additionally, so kind of preliminary sort of kickoff on this, where we're going to just talk a little bit about what you want to see, what you like, what you don't like. We're going to make a few changes to bring that draft to Planning Commission. Planning Commission will make a recommendation on that, and you will see it at your meeting in December for approval of the whole thing. And there'll probably be concurrently a small amendment to your fee schedule to adapt for the application fees.
With that, is that an application fee or a registration fee?
Registration fees, excuse
Because I think there's inconsistencies in the, a little bit, because it says the application shall include the application fee.
2B1.
But then you talk about it, the city shall not charge an application fee.
Which page are you looking at?
Page 3 and page 4. I don't know if you're referring to the state, but I think it's the.
Yeah, so the terminology is a little different. You got licensing at the state, the application, you're not able to charge an application fee. You will charge a registration fee. Those are the fees that are set forth, and this actually follows the OCM draft. So this is what.
But you see what I'm saying, B?
Yeah, they sometimes use it interchangeably. Frankly, there's another point I'll show you.
Okay.
I'll drill down even more on
I
that.
get nitpicky
But
with that
nope,
stuff.
that's okay. I do too. So I think the point would be, we're going to be okay on that portion. You can't charge an application for, can you come in and add something on, for example, right? Or drive up the cost, at a local level to keep business. You can't do any of that. It's a set registration fee. It's whatever, half of the state fee that's set by statute. So all we would do is probably have our fee schedule just say, we'll follow that, because that's all we're able to do anyway. By walking through the registration process, again, a lot of questions I get asked are about, well, what does this look like? We don't know anything about cannabis. How are we supposed to regulate it, et cetera? That's in theory all supposed to happen from the state. They're the licensing agency, and you're thinking to yourself, well, they'll probably be the enforcement agency. Unfortunately not. That's the unfunded mandate part of this. You get to be the enforcement agency even though they're doing the licensing. You register, you don't license, but you do enforce. Your mandate is to send Wayzata PDA out to any of the entities that have a retail operation of any form that includes lower potency hemp edibles, and they have to do a ID check once a year. So send a decoy in to see if an underage can purchase the products. You don't have to do anything more than that. You can, but you don't. This is a good place, I think, to tangent for a moment. Hennepin County has at times, and maybe some of you have heard of this, has offered services in the form of delegation to their authority. In other words, you can offer your registration and enforcement authority to Hennepin County. They would take it on and do that for you. Initially, this was very vague. They didn't provide us with much detail, and it was presumed by me, at least, to be kind of a take it or leave it proposition, and it wasn't something I thought that most of the cities would be interested in just because of the loss of authority at the local level. In speaking with a couple of the reps at Hennepin County, I was informed, no, they would be receptive to some adaptation of the resolution. However, when I proposed a draft, it's not been responded to. So my suggestion at this point, and again, the county was supposed to have an ordinance that would be out that you could review, you could see what their intent was. That was supposed to be done in October. That has not happened, and now their projection is 2025. So
Would they charge you for that? I mean, would that be a fee schedule for them to do the,
no, and good question. What's in it for them, right?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have clarity on that. That was one of my questions that I posed to them. I think what they would do is, remember, retail operations there's a percentage of the 10% of the profits. All right, get put into a pool that's split 80-20. That 20 cities get to split up based on the number of registrations you have locally. My presumption is, as the registering agency, they would take your share of that. Now, that might not, that's 20% of not very much, maybe, depending on how many you have locally. But if you're not planning on letting a lot of them in, it's probably worth it, in other words, to pay for the enforcement value that you get.
you could point fingers.
I'm actually more concerned about the actual wording of it, Deirdre, to be honest with you, because my concern is there's a provision in the law that says that a governmental agency which registers these cannabis retail businesses, right, can limit it to 1 per 12.5. So the question I have is, if we delegate that authority, do we cease to be one of those entities? And do we lose that authority to limit? In other words, do we completely fall to the mercy of whatever Hennepin County allows? That was one of the questions I asked. I didn't get a response to. But what I did for my part is I made a bunch of changes to the resolution. One of the things I put in was to say we intentionally are not, we are retaining our authority as a registering entity. But again, they didn't respond to the draft, so I don't know where they stand or what their opinion of that is. But until they kind of, I think, determine what their position is and get back to us, we can, in the new year, we can look at that and decide if it's a viable option. But I think for now, we just have to presume as though we're going to do our own thing for now, because we just don't know enough to delegate that authority. Along with the zoning, right, as far as which zoning districts you're going to put it in, do you want to limit the retail operations? Again, it's only the retail that you have the ability to even register. All the rest of them are just completely licensed by the state and are bound by where you would allow it locally for zoning. There also, it's permissible to put in certain buffer zones, okay? 1,000 feet from schools, 500 from daycares, state residential facilities, and parks with children's amenities, okay? Playgrounds and ball fields and things like that. So those are set by statute. You are completely safe to do that. You can look at adding others, though I don't recommend that, number one, because I don't know that it's going to serve a really great purpose for you, and you'd have to establish what that is and defend it if you do. And number two, in Hannah's review, and I don't know if you got a copy of her map, you'll see that there's kind of some circles and kind of, what you want to do is you want to have it go in the right places without creating some sort of de facto blanket over the entire city that doesn't allow it anywhere. You can't do that, right?
I have a question too on that, some of your language, because it's the same point.
Sure.
One of the things that kind of concerned me is it may be amended, shall prohibit an active cannabis business or cannabis business seeking registration from continuing operation should something come in. At the same site, if a school or
Right.
moves within the municipal buffer zone. So I think that's something that we should discuss, because if somebody has a
I'll
business.
stop you on that one. That's a mandate of law.
It is?
We're not able to do anything with
Oh,
that.
okay, so
yeah, so basically what it says is that if the business is there for a school, then moves in next door, business is grandfathered in, right?
Yeah.
You can't make a move. Now, the next application that were to come in will be analyzed with that distance from the school.
Okay.
But the one that's there already is established. I actually piggybacked onto that and added a provision that if this business tries to relocate, they are subject to the new registration protocol.
So say that, because I read it a little differently, that.
Well, so if, say you have a business that's located, that's set up and operating a retail operation locally, and at some point in the future, that business decides, I like that spot over on the other side of town better, okay? But whether it's buffering, whether it's the county reaches the threshold, right, and you don't have to allow them, the point is you treat the analysis of the new operation as a new application, not a relocation of the one that's in front of you. In other words, they don't have an entitlement to a business license anywhere in the city. It's only on that space with that license. Does that make sense?
And then if there's change in ownership of that business?
Change of ownership, not necessarily, no. It follows the licensure. I'd have to get clarity on how OCM is gonna deal with that. I'm not sure if they know
It does
or
say in
not.
here that a cannabis retail registration issued under this ordinance shall not be transferred.
You cannot transfer it, that's true. But if it's whether or not OCM will consider the same business under different ownership to have transferred a license. I don't know the answer to that.
Because if you could transfer the license, you can't transfer the license, but the registration, if somebody bought the business, so.
The registration is gonna follow the licensure, though. I'm confident of that. Regardless of what happens, they won't give us any authority on that. Our authority, which you have to try to focus your energy as far as looking at this, is zoning. It's all about zoning. Where do we want it, in what kind of capacity? Where does it belong here but not here? We have that.
But what I'm concerned,
Yeah.
to me, it seems like, okay, if I build a business, I'm just kind of thinking, I know we want to limit it, but if you're building a business and all of a sudden you go to sell it, and you can't sell the business,
Yeah, well, it would.
Because
it would-
you can't transfer
It
the
would really,
registration.
it would depend on the licensure. I don't know how, I'd have to find out. I don't know if we have any clarity on that from OCM, but they would be the ones that would determine whether the license can stay with that business under a different owner.
But what
if
about
a
the
parent
registration?
passed it to a child or something like that. Or whether they'd have to go through a new process. But our registration would follow whatever that licensure decision was. So if they said it's a new operation, you can evaluate it as a new license, then I think we can look at it as a new registration.
It says so in your draft.
Right. Right, that we would follow the licensure?
No, it just says a cannabis retail registration issued under this ordinance shall not be transferred.
It does say that, yes. It's a
So-
matter of what they consider to be transfer, and I don't. know the
Okay,
answer
like
to that.
a transfer of ownership may not be
Yep.
a transfer.
So.
You can't sell them on the open market.
No, you absolutely cannot do that. It's not a free-for-all that way. They'd have to follow whatever protocols OCM would allow. And I don't know if there is a, wholly owned subsidiary or some sort of passage through a family or something that's allowed to maintain current ownership, right? But a transfer to a different third party,
Okay.
not allowed, yes.
And so this is just the model language, because I looked at
That actually came straight from OCM, correct, yep.
Okay.
Yep, so,
And these buffer regions, are they for distribution of products or something like a brewery?
so, okay,
Something.
good question. The buffers themselves, the way that the statute actually reads, is it says you can buffer from cannabis businesses. Cannabis businesses is actually a defined term in 342, which includes all of the licenses. And so you technically could buffer from manufacturer, any kind of warehouse or delivery and retail. I have written it to follow registration, which would mean it would follow retail. Now, the reason for that is that made logical sense to me as far as, what are we most fearful of? Really, it's kids getting access to be able to buy the product, right? Not necessarily that they're too close to the building where the product is cultivated, right? You can feel differently about that. You can tell me to change that, I will change that. But the way I've written it presently, the buffering goes from the retail operations, but not all operations. I had Hannah run both checks though, and she told me that it would eliminate some more property, but it would still not be a de facto blanket. We'd probably be okay. So if you want that, I can do that. That's actually one of my questions for you.
Do other people put in public buildings?
What's that?
Do other people put in public buildings as a buffer zone?
From,
Like the city of Long Lake.
Zoning part, so like the city hall, public building, 500 feet from city hall?
oh, you're saying, do they add that?
Yeah, right, because I mean,
No,
as right now.
I haven't seen anybody that's really adding. I had one city that asked about adding churches, and I kind of walked them through what that looked like, and they decided not to do that. But you could, what I would say is the statute says you can put in reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. It then sets forth these exact parameters and says you absolutely can do this.
Okay.
So everything else is a gray area, but we can try to defend it. So for example, if you feel a compelling reason that you shouldn't have something 500 feet from a public building, okay, we'll be ready to defend that, and we can put that into the code.
I know that it's not the same, but, you have the right to carry, but you can't carry within a public building. Or, they put restrictions on there, so what's the
Right.
difference? When you start looking on rights versus
Sure.
regulations.
Well, I think that's a little bit different because you're talking about actually physically bringing a weapon into a building versus the operation that creates the weapon, right? Or sells the weapon, something like
Yeah.
that, right? And that would seem to be more what this would target. But if you see a reason, Scott, that I don't think that they should be selling these products within 500 feet
No,
of City Hall, then, we can.
I mean, I guess selling is different. I mean, I guess I haven't read it quite clean enough, because like you said, if there's a smoke shop and they have sitting out on the patio, or you know what I'm saying, like how you used to be able to smoke.
Yep.
Now
So-
that's going through the neighborhood and changing your
okay,
dynamics.
So basically, what you're talking about more is the performance standards,
Correct.
right? And so, I do recommend you do that, and that's a good another tangent point. I would recommend that the council consider using performance standards in the zoning ordinance. Make them what you want them to be. I've proposed some in here. Hannah put them into the zoning draft. But, hours of operation, odor control, noise control, access, security cameras, all that kind of stuff. Things that you would say, this is what I want these kind of businesses, how they should be monitored, right? Or what the protocols they should have in place. Because they're somewhat universal, I think. I would recommend doing that over, for example, putting in like a CUP protocol or something like that. And the reason for that is a couple things. On a CUP, that's going to take some time to process. The state gives us a hard 30 days to give thumbs up or thumbs down on a registration opportunity, right? They make an application for registration. We have to answer inside of 30 days. And there's no extension that we can use as we could under the 60-day rule. Now, as a way to address that, what you could do is simply deny an applicant that doesn't have a CUP where one is required and make them come back when they do. I think that probably would hold for now. I don't know, they may change the law on that, but that would probably hold for now. That's the smaller problem. The larger problem, I think, comes down to we are preempted from placing additional restrictions over and above the 342 restrictions, right? Statutory over local registration. So what we can't do is say, I don't want cannabis here, so I'll put a conditional use permit and then say it doesn't fit with any neighborhood in my town, right? I can't say that, even though under a CUP, I can say something doesn't fit with the neighborhood, probably doesn't meet the standard, right? But our analysis for the compliance to 342 is more of it's a legal permitted use in this area. We've said it's okay to use in this area, but in other areas, there's some ground rules you gotta follow, right? And those you can make broad across all areas you allow it. If you wanted to allow it under a CUP, I would recommend allowing it as a permitted use somewhere else. That makes your CUP standards that much more defensible. Somebody comes in and they say, that's not fair, you're adding extra restrictions to my licensed business that you can't do. Well, our response would be, we don't have to even allow it in the zoning district. We have a permitted use over here. We just think this area needs extra protection. So you could do it that way, but probably for consistency, my recommendation is come up with solid performance standards that you support and just have that universally apply to all the businesses. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know, were you down on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the map at the back of Hannah's.
Yeah.
It looks like this is the set of all parks and educational institutions within Long Lake and a buffer around them.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a park that borders Long Lake, should that be included? If there's a
I think
daycare right across the street from?
I think it should. I think if you say daycare, it doesn't necessarily have to mean a daycare within the city limits of Long Lake. It could just be within a daycare. We think it's a problem to be that close to a daycare. It doesn't matter if it's that side of the tracks or this side of the tracks,
Yeah,
right?
I'm just looking at the ways that a boulevard.
Yeah.
See stuff.
Yep. And that is how Hannah drew it up.
Okay.
That she asked the same question, and I told her, yeah, draw it as proximity to any of those. So those buffers in theory should kind of, all she did really was draw the radius from the areas you would have it. I guess
Within Long Lake parks and schools,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So like I'm looking at Summit Park,
Yeah.
doesn't have it, and then isn't there something across on the north side, or is that a boulevard?
Yeah, there's two daycares over there.
Yeah, okay.
Little Acorns and the one in the, next to the strip.
Yeah, that's
That's true if they're in the city of Orono.
So this daycare / educational institution is in Orono, but then the buffer could extend into Long Lake.
That's what this is.
Isn't that's the last one? Isn't that like the dome?
That's apparently the sports dome, there's a school.
So you
at
have
the
two more
sports
to
dome?
the east of there.
Yeah, the sports dome is in
Oh, but what about the,
Preparatory Academy.
what about the little acorns?
Yeah,
in
that's on the
Orono?
north side of Wayzata, that's not showing on here.
But it would, it would
But it
be,
wouldn't be impacted because the minimum,
It's Orno.
is that your interpretation, John, if it's in a different
I
city?
think you could take either approach to it, but my feeling on it is if it's a problem being 500 feet from a daycare, it shouldn't matter what city that daycare is in.
Yeah, I agree.
So that would limit some of it over in that area too then, kind of the Caribou area and those businesses there.
And that was the conversation I had with Hannah, so maybe she hasn't added those in, but I can give her that feedback too, to make sure that those get included. She seemed to think that it wasn't gonna create a situation where we don't have it allowed reasonably in a more broad sense.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned the cultivation versus the retail. I think we said is a reasonable distinction. If somebody's making widgets inside of a warehouse that kids don't have access to, that doesn't really matter.
And John, can we go back to what you said maybe, 15 minutes ago when you started about the county and licenses in the county? Kind of what's the timeline on that as far as those licenses hitting their maximum, and then we sort of, other cities can sort of have a moratorium based on that?
Yeah, so all the city moratoriums are gonna come off first of the year. That's the end of the authority for it. So the licenses will start rolling out. They had an early registration period with a lottery that went through, so there's a lot of people that are positioned, businesses that are positioned to start pretty early on this. I don't anticipate that they're gonna hit that threshold anytime soon. I could be wrong, but I guess what I would say is it won't matter if you get an application in the first 6 months or something like that. You're probably just gonna have to allow one. If you don't get one for the first couple of years, it's probably worth making a call to Hennepin County and saying, hey, where are your numbers on this? They have pledged to create some sort of a GIS map that should make that determination relatively easy. We haven't seen it yet, but that's
Just like their ordinance that they're supposed to create.
right. But that apparently is in the works. So we should have some ability to relatively ease determine where we are related to that threshold. And then we can make that inquiry when we get an application, if in fact it's down the road a little bit and we're actually wondering, maybe Minneapolis took enough of them that we don't have to take one.
Okay. So that's not necessarily a short-term solution, that would be more down the road.
Basically, I built in the provision to say we'll take the lowest number we're allowed to take, and we just take the facts as they come from there, because we don't control how they get rolled out, but if they come here late, maybe we'll have hit it, and if they come here early, they'll probably be allowing one. So, but some people did this set up an operation, and that'll be one operation. Yeah, municipal operation, but it won't count as your one. Anything owned by the city.
Competition?
Let's see here. Location change. Cannabis events, another thing, it's a little bit unusual. This is one of those kind of inconsistencies that probably, it's a little bit, it's a little bit confusing because it goes against expectations, at least for me it did. A lot of cities will regulate local sampling at tobacco shops, all right? No sampling, you can't have the product, you can buy the product, but you can't use it on site, right? You don't have that ability to block a retail operation from doing that because they're permitted to under their licensure under 342. However, there is a separate license, completely separate from the retail operation, that is for cannabis events. And no more than 4 days, they can hold them in various places. You can decide where the events go, you can decide hours, you can put in a bunch of other performance standards that we talked about, but you can also stop them from allowing any consumption at events. Not at the retail operation, but yes, at the events. So I wrote it in to take the amount of authority we have, so I did it at the events, but if you want that changed, we can do so. One change, it's just something that kind of bugged me, Deirdre, this is kind of to your point, just kind of drilling down in some of the language. The language in a number of places refers to registrations. Registrations are tied to licenses. Licenses can allow up to, in certain things, up to 5 locations. So I didn't want anybody to broadly interpret that, so I did kind of put in a little bit of revised language to make clear that when we say registration, we mean one retail location operation, right? So that I don't know if that change has made it into this version, but that has been added as well. Just because it kind of bugged me that it wasn't spelled out. The draft you have shows hours of operation limited down to 9 to 9. That's another amendment. I recommend making that 10 to 9. That is the least amount of hours you can allow, and it's across the board, and it's easy to remember, because Sundays are different than every other day, where they can't operate until 10 o'clock every other day. They could start earlier if they wanted to, but you can restrict from 8 to 10 on the other days of the week if you wanted to, but for consistency's sake, my recommendation is just go 10 to 9 every day, all events. The hours are always the same when you're selling cannabis locally. It'll be easier for enforcement purposes. I think, did we talk about the enforcement protocols? I think we did. In case we didn't, our obligation is to do a license check, but not a product check. One of the nice things, actually, if the county is at some point able to intervene and doesn't require us to give up too much authority, they will have resources to check potency and packaging and things like that. Things that the Wayzata PD isn't really going to be able to check for you. They'll just check if their people are, their salespeople are selling to adults. But until the county comes up with something that we can really sink our teeth into, I think we have to just kind of wait and bide our time. The civil penalties, things like that, are generally, they follow kind of the state law and the OCM recommendations. We should talk about lower potency hemp edibles, the 23 regulations that we put in place to deal with the gummies. We did it, I think we allowed 5, Scott. I think we allowed it across 4 different zoning areas. We had 1 in each, and one of them had 2. I would suggest, and I got support from both Jeanette and Hannah on this, to potentially just make it 5, and that's all you allow locally. That's your cap, so we'll have a cap for the cannabis business at 1, and you'll have a cap for the lower potency hemp edible retailers at 5. Hannah also recommended making it an accessory use in the B3 because there is no retail allowed there, but it would probably be sold, at Birch's. The seltzer waters, I guess, is something they intend to sell. So that made sense to me. So that probably, if that's not reflected in your materials, that was something we talked about this afternoon. So she may not have had a chance to do that. So let's see here.
So you didn't put, like, I know the events, the temporary events?
Yes.
There's nothing, you're gonna address where it goes with the zoning, because there's nothing it says.
The events themselves, no, as of right now, no. I mean, we don't have any particular, basically what we say is you have, we've drawn a distinction between retail and non-retail.
Yeah,
Retail is where we have the most authority to regulate, and those you're gonna have only probably in districts that allow sales versus kind of everything else, and whether that gets split up. But Hannah's opinion on that was they really belong in the 2 industrial districts anyway. Now you can limit further, so that brings up a good point. Do you want to see events only in certain places in town, and if so, where?
because I see the, park is the event, because they have lots of requirements, certified medical professional,
Yeah.
but that doesn't seem right. But that's where logically somebody would have a cannabis event,
But, it's, you have some.
because where else would they have it?
Well, you'd have to, there'd have to be areas in town that you make it available, because it is a license, a separate license. Again, it's a little counterintuitive because, well, you'd think the retailer gets to hold the event. No, it's a separate license for a separate group of people that can put on these events and take them around touring. And they can either allow consumption locally or they can't, and you can have them certain places or not, and you can control both of those. So, may just hit a couple of things that Hannah put in her memo, because I know she had a conflict for this evening, so.
So where do you see this? Fencing.
So Hannah had suggested that the retail be permitted B1, B2, B2A, and the BC1 village commercial. She thought it would be allowed as an accessory use in B3 for the reasons we talked about. She offered in her memo a couple of potential parcels and things like that. As far as the non-retail, her recommendation was I1 and I2, just, being that the restrictions between those 2 zones are really not that great. It's mostly size of property. Her decision points as listed here. So do you want the buffers? Do you like them at the max as they're set presently, or do you want to dial them back?
And sorry, the non-retail cannabis business would be like a bar, a restaurant kind of thing, or?
No, so non-retail, any place they're not selling the cannabis products, right, to the public. So manufacturer, there's gonna be delivery businesses, we anticipate things like that. So basically, if there's a retail front, so the way that I view it is, you know, if there's a retail front, then we've got our radar up for, we gotta keep kids away, right? But if not, we're a little less worried about it, right? And so the interesting thing there is that you've got retail of the higher potency stuff that's limited down to one potentially, and then you've got your lower potency hemp edibles that can be sold a number of other places that are usually accessory to something else. It's usually sold in a gas station, sold in a liquor store. There's usually not like a shop of just gummies. We don't see a lot of those. I don't know if there are any actually. So Hannah's memo, she mentions kind of the same framework that I talked about. She was asking you to look at the map. And the input that she primarily needs is on where, if you like the zoning district she selected, if you like the buffering as it's presented. The info I need is a little more high level to start with, which is, do you want to hold a second public hearing? Are we okay with running that through planning commission? You know, again, people will get a chance to have some input on the business regs because we'll have that presented as well. Also, you know, do you want the max restrictions? Do you want to have no use at cannabis events? Do you want to have the hours limited to the lowest number? Do you want to have only one operation? You can choose to allow it more broadly than this. You can't go a whole lot more restrictive.
Let's do all of those.
I had a question on Hannah's, subsection 26, cannabis businesses. And there's some things there about hours of operations, the buffers, it's all the underlying section there. It said that must implement comprehensive security measures. So, but are there similar, and maybe I just didn't see it, similar restrictions for like a cultivation or a distribution? Like, you know, there's a warehouse full of
Right, so,
cannabis, you think that's where.
yeah, no, good question. And wrapping your head around the, 15 different definitions can be tricky, but cannabis business is all the businesses, right? Everything that's licensed, whether it's retail or not.
Okay.
So yes, we envision those to apply kind of across the board. The buffers, as we mentioned, you would have the authority to apply to all businesses, because that's what they use in the statute, but you don't have to, to be clear, that's one point where I didn't go to the absolutely most restrictive version. I did it just from the retail operations, because we only register retail. And it's based on registration, so.
Okay. In the hours, there's a number of hours per day that you have to do it, or is there a specific?
So the most, you can prohibit sales from 10 a.m. You can allow sales from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. and restrict everything else, and it's either covered by a function of state law and then whatever authority we have to say yes or no for the rest of it. But what I did is I took all the restricted hours from the state, and I tacked on all the authority we had to further restrict locally, and what you get is 10 to 9.
So 10 and 9, they're special times.
Right.
It's not like we could say it's 9 to 8 or anything like that.
No, I mean, you could say, 9 to 9, Monday through Saturday, and then Sundays are 10 to 9, but I find that ends up being confusing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's just B2 that Hannah put retail compliant cannabis.
It's because of Birches? Is Birches B2?
No, I think
Better
that's
be 3.
That'd be 3.
are they Lakeshore? And that's low potency.
So it looks like, yeah, she put B1, she put lower potency, hemp edibles, same thing,
Where do you see B3?
Oh, I'm thinking R2. Yeah,
B2A.
sorry.
B3, she has a lower potency as an accessory use, PC1, lower potency. I1, it's cannabis businesses without a retail component, I2, same thing.
Lots of shades of pink on this.
I know.
And the
So
performance
basi-
standards, to Mike's point, do apply to all of them. Yeah, I'm just,
Where does she do
maybe she
that?
hasn't entered them here yet, and that's in her memo, though. She makes some kind of suggestions where they can go. I think she's used this because this is more of the carry forward provisions
Oh.
to the 23 law. So what I think she's asking for is, tell me where the higher potency business, or businesses, as the case may be, should go. So she's looking for direction. You can give her, you know, as long as we don't completely exclude it by buffers, you can give her one zone, you can give her all four of them, you can give them some combination. But the business operation probably doesn't fit the B3, because B3 is probably, you're gonna see like a Birch's sell seltzer water that's lower potency stuff, but they're not gonna allow retail there,
Yeah.
right? But the other, the other three, maybe they do work. You have a tobacco shop in one of them, for example,
Yeah.
Right,
that's-
so, yeah, it's really a matter of where you think it's appropriate. But what we wanted to do, and we're not holding you to decide all of it tonight, but if you can give some good guidance on what you want the draft to look like before it goes to planning commission, that will give them the best chance to give you a good recommendation.
With respect to that public hearing, like, I'm just kind of throwing, can we really advertise the planning commission meeting that this will be discussed? Because I think people want to kind of weigh in instead of having a separate public hearing. Like.
Yeah, no,
tell them-
absolutely, that is what most cities are doing. They're gonna hold the one public hearing related to the, that's your obligation to hold a public hearing is completely tied to the zoning changes. So you don't have to hold a public hearing beyond that. I think it is sufficient to do it that way, especially since Hannah will have the business regs at her disposal, can make that a part of the packet. People can offer comments on that. If there's strong opinions, you're gonna hear about them. And then, and then you can just take forward that public information and then decide. There are some cities that will say, yeah, but we haven't had a separate hearing to talk just about business regs, and we want to do that. I think they're kind of intertwined enough that you don't really need to, but not for me to say. So that's why I'm just kind of laying down options. So you can do that. We just have to plan for it, because we've got a 10-day notice period, meaning we'd have to get something out in early December to make sure we comply with that.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's typically where our public hearings are regarding these matters, planning commission level. And we could do a listserv message about it, kind of an extra notice about it. Let residents know if they want us to come forward, speak up. Okay, so kind of the bottom of page 2, we have the next steps. Staff will finalize draft zoning ordinance amendments based on work session direction. I think that means council direction, right? And then, public hearing, planning commission will hold a public hearing. Target date December 11th, 2024. And then we'll consider adoption of the zoning ordinance at the December 17th meeting. And so as far as back to number 1, then staff will finalize draft zoning ordinance based on our direction. Any direction any strong feelings outside of what's in writing before us? And
Yeah, I think that's probably an easy way to do it, Mayor, would be just if there are changes to what I've just laid out or what you've seen, maybe flag those for me and I can make those changes.
Yeah.
So what would you want to see different than what we have here?
Yeah, well, I think, just kind of echo John, the theme of restricting as much as we can seems to be.
less is better.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that point then. How do you feel about the buffers, the application of the buffers to registered retail businesses versus all cannabis
Yeah,
businesses?
that's a good question. Because I just made a comment that it didn't really matter to me, but that goes against the most restrictive nature. So, I don't know if you guys have strong opinions.
I'd like the most restrictive.
You'd like to see it all businesses then? Is that
Yeah.
A cannabis, so essentially what you're saying is you don't want them manufacturing cannabis next to the daycare.
Yeah, not that they're selling it, it's the fact that they're manufacturing it there. And I think that, looking at the fact that there is emphasis placed on security and theft and all that, it's like, okay, well, that does kind of
Yeah, there is like people.
raise that up a little bit. So I think I would say make it as restricted as possible.
okay?
Yeah,
What
we
about the temporary cannabis events? We have to have those?
You have to allow them, yes.
But,
But where are we gonna put them?
Well, they're allowed, but it doesn't mean you have to put them.
But like,
So
So
the,
there's no
since,
zoning restrictions you can do with that?
well,
Yes.
they
you
are
can.
from the distance.
Yeah, you can. It's a license at the state level. So it's kind of.
Okay.
You have to like kind of wrap your mind around it. It's an event license, but so usually you think about a use more than an event, right?
Yeah.
You know, so it's not a general event use in whatever zone you put in, but what we would write into the zoning table, well, I guess we don't have a zoning table, so we would just have to say, in this district, cannabis events are allowed, right? Subject to the buffers or not, but those are decisions you can make. What I would have to do is have Hannah run that, put that onto her map and make sure that we don't put it.
There's not gonna be very many places available.
Yeah,
That-
like where are you
that's-
gonna put it?
That's what we have to
Well,
watch.
and that's, I mean,
What's the parks? right?
well, once you put the other two daycares in on the north side of Wayzata, that's almost the downtown district.
Well, I think the
Right.
question is, are these events special and do they don't need to obey the buffers? Or,
Well, they're limited in intent, in the sense that, especially if you're not allowing consumption, then they're points of sale for up to 4 days, and they're gone, right? Versus, a cannabis shop setting up, I think there's an intensity that's a little
Think of a
different there.
firecracker stand.
But,
okay, I'm wondering.
You know,
yeah.
you can't use them there, but you can buy them there.
But,
And
but,
they're-
but it's a fair question to ask, if the idea is I don't want the sale to be available anywhere near where kids are congregating, then the same thing could apply,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Not to say I've not participated in cannabis events. It's hard for me to imagine what these would be.
Well, I mean, just throwing this out there, but another thing you could do, Mike, to address that specific concern is to say cannabis events can only go where a cannabis retailer could go.
Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, to the firecracker stand, would somebody make a proposal to like Ace Hardware parking lot in the corner or something? Or like what are
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, actually,
Yeah, that's
it would
true.
qualify. Because it'd
Okay.
be outside the buffer zone, and it's a retail zoned location that would fall inside our
But you could
ordinance.
have a cannabis, because why would they
But
have a
up to
cannabis
4 days
event
only.
at their retail shop? They already have a retail shop.
Well, is it the retail shop or is it somebody, I guess that's a question.
Right,
Is
how
it-
specific is that? Does it mean indoors? Does that be indoor? Can it be out? Does it be inside the event? Can we make the restriction to be inside the cannabis retailer, or would a parking lot be included, or? I'm a little fuzzy on that.
Well, and I think to your question is it somebody that necessarily has a license in Long Lake already? Because a firecracker stand, it's somebody coming through and selling
No,
firecrackers.
good question, and no, it does not have to be limited to that. That was one other question I had early on too, which was, it would make sense to me to say, we'll allow events, but we'll only do it from our local vendor, right? Like you would if you could do it for tobacco or something, or alcohol, something like that. But no, because it's a separate license at the state level, there's a separate entitlement to it.
So can somebody come in and say, I want to have an event and next week I want to have another event and next week I want to have another event?
I don't know what the sequential, how they tally that at the state level. I'd have to find that out.
Serial
right?
events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we move on?
Well, we gotta stop direction. So do you think, did staff have any recommendations about these special events, locations, and what we should do about those?
I think if you're comfortable just having them only in areas where retail is allowed and subject to the buffers, you're only gonna allow it where a business could go anyway, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, that makes sense to me, but
Yeah,
like that.
not the park.
Right. And then we just gotta be sure that Hannah includes any Orno, properties across Wayzata Boulevard there that would be.
yep,
that would add
I've
to the
got a note
buffer
to that
zone.
effect. I'll have her add those in.
Cause it's, I mean, obviously such a challenge where all these decisions are made at the Capitol and we're a little 1 mile square radius city, but what's unique about us is we have all these things going on as far as commercial, industrial, retail, parks. There's not a lot of options for these kind of things, so it's unfortunate that we're in this position, but, we obviously only have so much control over this based on the state law.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't give us a lot of authority, and what we do have is a little gray in places. And I fully expect we'll be kind of getting annual patches to this thing probably for a number of years, and we'll have to just keep adapting. But right now, we're kind of race to the starting point, right? To be in position to keep it where we want it to be or where we deem it appropriate. So that's what we're trying to do now. And I think I've got some good direction about this. If the council's otherwise comfortable with the draft as written and sort of the proposed framing as far as zoning districts, I will tell Hannah that she can run with her suggestions, that she should add the daycares to the buffer zones. We will do the one public hearing. We would like to restrict events the way we would restrict retail operations. We'll leave all the other restrictions as far as hours, and I will make the buffers apply to all businesses, not just retailers. Did I miss anything?
Well stated. I think you captured our discussion. Very much appreciate you kind of punting for Hannah on this. No, this wasn't necessarily initially the plan, so thank you. And I know you're well versed on this. I've heard from at least one other city attorney that they've looked to you in the past for advice, John, about the research you've done on this and your advice and that sort of thing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of a lot to get up to speed on.
Yeah, it was interesting. There's definitely a lot of moving parts, and I do really think that we're gonna be still learning things 3 years from now about it, and we'll be finding things that we took for granted or we thought one thing was intended where it really wasn't on the other side. But I know that the league has put forth a pretty good lobby to try to really protect local zoning authority. That's been one of their kind of the tip of the spear for them. So they'll keep doing that. And you know, as long as this council is supportive of just being as restrictive as we can, we'll keep modifying the draft to make sure that it is that. So.
You don't want to turn it, in my opinion, you don't want too many businesses in the community where we're a destination for.
Right. To that end, actually, there are some cities that are as an additional buffer. You know, and the ones that are set forth specifically in statute. Some are putting buffers between the operations themselves. I don't really think that fits us because we're only allowing one, right? I mean, if you were going to allow 3, maybe you'd say I'd only allow them in these districts, or they have to be so many feet from, you know,
the
other
competitor
operations, so that you don't have crowding, like you mentioned. But I think here it makes less sense. But that is something that people have looked at too, and there is some concern that some of the other cities, not Long Lake, but some of the other cities about, are we going to have a mad rush for too many of them? Are they going to pile on top of each other and then basically put each other out of business? So.
All right, great. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 7D, updates regarding fire department matters. It's a continual item on our agenda. I guess, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, or we haven't actually met for almost a month, have we? So it has been quite a while. But the major news in the last, since we met last, was an election, obviously, and there's been a major shift in the Orono City Council. The mayor and who was elected, and then 2 of the council members ran the platform of working with their neighbors and trying to figure out this fire department situation with their city. So I'm personally very appreciative to the Orono voters for choosing the candidates they did. Those candidates have already been in contact with us and are interested in working the situation out. This was scheduled to go to court or to go to trial in March, and there's already been some discussions amongst the legal teams representing both cities to see if we can start having. Probably after the new council takes office, having some discussions in out of court, some settlement discussions occurring to figure out how best to move forward. There's sort of a short-term, concerns or issues going on regarding fire service, particularly in Orono, and then and particularly long-term, what we can do long-term to solve this issue and figure out fire as it says on the signs around our community. So we're very, very excited about that, or at least I am, and we'll have some discussions in the coming weeks and months with our counterparts over at Orono, the new council, and representatives from their council to try to come to a resolution on this matter and move forward and do what's best for our communities and the safety of our communities that we all live in and are currently represented by Long Lake Fire Department and the Orono Fire Department as well. So a few comments there. We'll keep the community updated as time goes on. And very excited about it myself. Seems like we're kind of a melancholy mood here tonight because the lights are kind of dim. But I'm very excited about that myself. Any other comments about that from folks, or? If not, okay. Great. So appreciate a lot of work went into just in general running for city council, campaigning. I know it's been social media posts, all the things that go into being a democracy in our community, in our state, et cetera. So I want to just thank everybody who's involved in that, and it's people put themselves out there to run for office, and appreciate everybody who's been willing to do that. So with that, we'll move on to item 8, other business. Councilmember Qualley.
Nothing for me.
Nothing, thank you.
Feldman.
Just a reminder that the Orono High School varsity football team is in the state tournament and playing at US Bank on Friday in the semifinals in Class 4A. And we're playing at 11:30 against Totino Grace, I think. Yeah, I think that's who it was. And good luck to them.
Yeah, good luck.
That's great.
Yeah, my son's on the team.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Congratulations. That's great. For me, just other business or upcoming agenda or calendar. We've got next council meeting is on the 26th, Tuesday the 26th, which is kind of 2 days before Thanksgiving, and included in that will most likely be a closed session with our legal team regarding our court case with Orono. So it looks like we just kind of piece that together the last day or two. It looks like it's going to work for our legal team. So just for council members, hopefully you can make it on Tuesday the 26th, time to be determined, but most likely 5 o'clock for a closed session that evening. So we have planning commission meeting on November 19th, a week from today. And then city office is closed for the Thanksgiving holiday on 28th and 29th. Oh, I went to a great Veterans Day service yesterday at the Orono High School. I was invited to that each year by Mayor Julie Moskowski from Maple Plains. She does a really good job putting on the event along with staff from Orono schools, our Orono Rotary, and local VFW. I believe it's the, I guess I'm not sure exactly which VFW it is, but it's not the one that usually comes to our events here in Lone Lake. But that was a great event. It's I always appreciate seeing the high school kids come down and shake the hands of veterans who are there that are from the VFW and otherwise, and showing their appreciation to the veterans. So great event there, and thanks to Mayor Moskowski for putting that on. So that is it for me. City Administrator Wesky.
I do not have anything.
All right. City Attorney Thames, anything else?
Heard enough from me tonight.
All right, we appreciate your time.
Can that one go back?
That's never happened before, but
No,
okay.
it hasn't, but I don't want to get in trouble at home. And so I want to say congratulations, too, to the Orono girls swim and dive team, because some of them are going to state this weekend at the University of Minnesota, and my daughter happens to be one of them. So I don't want to get in trouble for mentioning my son and not my daughter.
Are there any sports teams you're forgetting?
Cross country.
Well, we'll leave it at that.
That's right. Kids in all the sports. All right. With that being said, then, if there's no objection, I'll adjourn the meeting by general consent. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at 8:01 p.m.